Replacing Biden with Harris impacts other races too, including important Senate battles. What's the best way to prosecute the case for a GOP majority in the Senate, given the new top of the ticket? Joining us is someone who served with then Senator Kamala Harris, Republican Conference Chair, Senator John Barrasso from the great state of Wyoming. Welcome, Senator. Does the change at the top impact how the Senate races will be run, or expand or contract the playing field in any way?
Well, a couple of things. First, the Democrats have now nominated the most radical ticket in the history of the United States, and they have said if they take the White House, the House, and the Senate, which is why the Senate is so important here, that they're going to do three things. One is they're going to add new states to the Union, the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, with 4 new very liberal senators. They say they will immediately add 4 new young liberal members to the Supreme Court, changing the makeup of the court significantly. And they're going to revolutionize voting in this country, making it possible for more illegal immigrants to vote because they're going to want to get rid of voter ID. Kamala Harris is way liberal. I served with her. She was the most liberal member of the United States Senate, more liberal than Bernie Sanders. You're talking about a dangerously liberal, San Francisco liberal. She's at the top of the ticket. And what we're seeing now is some Democrat candidates for the Senate don't want to show up at the Democrat National Convention because they don't want to be associated with a ticket that is absolutely that liberal.
You know, the only thing to the left of Bernie Sanders is a cliff. You're right. She was found to be the most liberal member of a body that includes Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, but her ads don't mention that. They mention her time as a prosecutor, not her time raising bond for protesters. So what is the best argument against her leading the nation? What is the way to communicate what you just communicated, which was she was to the left of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren when she was in the Senate?
And let's take a look at some of the positions that she had. And one was she wanted to eliminate private health insurance in America, but give free health care to illegal immigrants. She has been so active in terms of the Green New Deal, wanting to get rid of fracking in this country. That's going to drive up energy costs. You know, as you said, raising bail money for criminals, but making it easier for illegal immigrant criminals to stay in this country. I was with President Trump yesterday. He was in Wyoming with a number of us and talking about the future of the country. If we want a better life for Americans, we need Republican House, Republican Senate, Republican president. I mean, that's the way you get people with more money in their pocket. That's the way you make sure we have a secure border. That's the way people don't have to choose between putting food on the table and gas in the tank. We give parental rights in schools, make sure that the cops are protected, not what Kamala Harris did, which was always trying to defund the police. Those are the articles and the topics that we need to continue to talk about if we want the American people to vote Republican and move in that direction. And President Trump, in his discussion, you may have seen it in terms of the Senate race, he was in Montana on Friday night with Tim Sheehy, Naval SEAL, combat veteran, true conservative. President Trump's going to do really well there. Tim Sheehy, I believe, is going to beat John Tester to pick up a seat there. With J.D. Vance on the ticket. In Ohio, we have Bernie Moreno, terrific candidate. I believe we're going to pick up a seat there. We have more than 8 opportunities around the country, solid, conservative, Republican candidates who are going to make sure there's a better life for the people of their state and a better life for America. That's the argument we need to go ahead all the way through November with.
Senator, it is clear to me, if nothing else is clear, it is clear she does not like the title border czar. So she's going to have to come up with an explanation. And I guarantee you it's going to be the Senate bill would have fixed everything, but the House killed it. So what should the GOP response to that be? Because you and I both know that's what she's going to say.
She is a dangerously liberal, open border vice president. 10 million illegal immigrants have come into this country under her watch right now, when she's been the border czar. And we're talking about people who, criminal cartels, drug dealers, people on the terrorist watch list, people that have come into this country and have raped and murdered U.S. citizens. She doesn't think illegal immigration should be against the law. She wanted to get rid of immigration and customs enforcement. So yeah, she's trying to backpedal. She's trying to point fingers. She'd be pointing fingers at herself. when President Trump left office, two things have happened. One is prices have gone up 20% since then, but 10 million illegal immigrants. And we know that we had a system that worked. He was building the wall, finishing that. We had Remain in Mexico, a policy that worked. The Democrats came in with this catch and release. They have not followed the law of the land, or the border would still be secure. We wouldn't have had this invasion of 10 million illegal immigrants who the Democrats now want to be able to vote.
Senator John Barrasso from the great state of Wyoming, thank you for joining us on a Sunday night. Look forward to it. It was great seeing you last weekend. I hope I see you again real soon.
Thanks. Thanks, Trey.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.